Hi. Well, there's a heading. Structure. There are a lot of gurus out there who have made an awful lot of money breaking down why a film does or does not work. There's absolutely no point in me covering what they have already covered so well. This is not the type of course to get bogged down in ever decreasing circles worrying about whether the end of Act 1 is at the right page count or whatever. I don't even really believe that all stories should necessarily have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There are some wonderful movies out there that start after the beginning or finish before the end. Likewise, you don't have to tell your story in chronological order. You could feasibly combine 2 or 3 stories and tell them all and have them meet at some point later down the line. You could start at the end and then rewind and show how we ended up there in the first place. What am I talking about, I hear you cry? Well, have a look at Pulp Fiction, at Amores Perros, at Saving Private Ryan, at Memento, at Paris, Texas, at In the Mood for Love, One Fine Morning. David Lynch suggests that you just need 70 postcards. On each card, you write a scene. In each scene, 2 things need to change or develop. The character needs to develop and the plot move forward in some way, shape or form. Then you have a movie on those 70 cards. An interesting interview with the writer Donald Miller, he offered some insight by saying heroes and villains have the same backstory, one of pain. Villains have a limp or a scar, an impediment denoting this backstory. The difference between a hero and a villain, though, is how they respond to this adverse history. The villain says, I got hurt, so I'm going to punish the world. Whilst the hero says, I don't want anyone else to suffer what I went through. I guess in this day and age there's a strong argument against making villains visibly scarred or lacking in some way, as decades of this has adversely affected how people with disabilities are seen. I'd echo that as a person of colour. But it's interesting insight into character nevertheless, don't you think? Look, there are as many ways to construct a movie as there are writers out there. The problem is we've all been funneled. We've all been reprogrammed to do it a certain way. And that way serves several things. It makes for a lot of unimaginative movies, and it means we're all going after the same goal in our finance endeavours, so butting heads with the same gatekeepers who are completely inundated. And we aren't necessarily telling the story as the story needs to be told. Listen to the story. Let the story tell itself, unfold, reveal itself. Now, if that means a 3-act, 90-page screenplay, then great. But hear it if it doesn't mean that. Ironically, the no-budgeter is actually in a very similar position to the biggest blockbusters out there, in that they are often not even written at the time the filming starts. Keira Knightley left the Pirates franchise after finding herself shooting a scene but with no idea what happened to get her there in the first place, as there was no script to read. Terrifying for anyone left holding the baby, as it were, because she was going to be the one blamed when her character arc made absolutely no sense to the viewer. Can you imagine? Russell Crowe said upon making Gladiator that by the time he and Ridley Scott met on the set, there were only 21 pages of the script he was willing to be in. The rest was garbage. So they filmed these whilst they worked on the rest of the script. Now, I'm not saying you need to rock up without a screenplay, far from it. But you can see that even at that level, the notion of an intricately structured 3-act, 100-page screenplay was anything but what they had to work with going into it. It was something that had an inordinate amount of money thrown at it to get something down on the page, but I can guarantee you that screenplay did not resemble anything that would be entered into a screenplay competition. A workable shooting script, especially one that only you and a few others are going to see, really doesn't need to go through all those hoops and adhere to all the rules set down by industry recognised screenplay practice. The story is your guide here. Serve the story. Serve your lead characters and make everything make sense to your characters, and don't allow them to do anything that's out of character purely to serve your plot. That's where you get into trouble. It's the wrong way round. The plot needs to come out of what your characters are doing at any given time. It needs to be derived by how they would respond to any given stimulus. One person getting shot in the leg behaves completely differently from another. On seeing a snake, one person wrangles it into a bag to deposit it in the back garden, whilst another person vacates the house screaming and believing they're going to have to sell up and move. I'm being a little silly here, but you can see my point. Be clear about who your characters are and how they would react to any given set of circumstances, and then don't deviate from that. Be true to them. I'm not saying that a character can't develop, of course they can and they do, but they still remain true to themselves. So in every scene, their character develops, moves forward, or more is revealed about who they are, and then the plot also needs to develop. I feel I need to leave things a little open here because I have absolutely no way of knowing what it is you're trying to do and what you have in mind, and don't want to block your creativity. You've all done enough already, presumably, to have an idea what the usual tropes are and perhaps what's held you back up to this point. There's a reason you bought into this course. You're also buying into its ethos. I'm not here to write your script for you, but merely to encourage, to point you in the right direction and shove you really hard in the back to go and get it done. So go and get it done. Get it written. All the best films at their heart are character-based, character-led. I don't care if you want to cite the most action-packed movies, Die Hard, Rambo, Predator, Iron Man. They're all character-led, and that's why they've stood the test of time. One explosion looks very like another. Bruce Willis is on record as saying he was shooting some movie running down the road with a gun in his hand, and for a moment he had absolutely no idea what movie it was, being so similar to every other movie he'd shot over the years leading up to that point. But the original Die Hard stands out because not only of who John McClane was, but also who Alan Rickman's baddie was, the local cop was, and his wife's character. All well drawn and well performed. Your structure needs to support the telling of your story. Let the characters come first and see what they tell you, what they give you. Give them space. What's really interesting is that so many memorable great scenes come from the actors themselves. Once they've found a character and can run around in their skin. Dustin Hoffman famously in Midnight Cowboy, crossing the road when a car nearly runs him over, and he says, "I'm walking here." He just came out with that. Russell Crowe in Gladiator picked up ththese little dolls made from the set dressing, and they thematically became something huge in that movie, representing his wife and family. Rutger Hauer's extraordinary Batty in Blade Runner came up with the whole Tears in Rain speech at the climax of the movie. Actors will always add a whole other dimension to your film. Get your cast right, give them the space to fly, and they'll give you jewels. Serve your story, stay true to your characters, and as a final note on the writing, I'd advise, once you think you're done, to sit down with the screenplay with the sole purpose of working out where you can condense things. Developing a screenplay is, more often than not, all about crystallization of story, of plot, of character. So if you're able to successfully combine scenes such that more happens at once on different levels for the character and the plot, then do so. Your audience will thank you for it. In doing so, you keep things moving along and force the audience to engage, to pay attention. Never allow the audience to be ahead of you, the storyteller, unless it's by design. Like in a comedy where everyone knows there's a banana skin waiting for the next person to come around the corner. Usually they don't need to see whatever's coming around the corner until you decide to deliver it. I'd cite Suzanne Bier's Open Hearts or watch J.J. Abrams' Cloverfield. I used to review films, and one of the things I loved about the job was seeing movies as the director intended, where you knew absolutely nothing about the film. You took your seat, the lights went down, and you just let the story unfold as the director intended. I never saw Cloverfield unfolding as it did. It started out as one sort of movie and took a whole left turn. It was worth it just for that. Now it's billed as a monster flick, and half of the joy of the film is lost. As far as I can, if I hear a movie is good, I'll try to avoid reading anything about it. I'll swerve the trailers just so I can go in knowing as little as I can beforehand.